This episode of Marketecture is brought to you by Start.io, an industry-leading mobile SSP. If you build ad campaigns, Start.io is offering Marketecture listeners curated evergreen deals with no audience fees. Visit www.start.io/no-fees to activate today. That's www.start.io/no-fees. This podcast is brought to you by Adelaide. Media verification and measurement are undergoing major disruption. Legacy players are pivoting to performance advertising, AI is reshaping brand safety, and attention is replacing viewability. Adelaide is leading the shift with AU, a new way to assess media quality that scores placements based on their potential to drive attention and outcomes before your ads run. Think of it like a credit score for media. Finally, a clear view of quality before you buy. Take the guesswork out of your investment strategy and try Adelaide AU on your next campaign. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. I'm Paparo. I am down here in Arlington, Virginia, covering the Google trial all week. So I'm from a hotel room and got a little mic instead of my normal mic. I feel like I'm kind of roughing it. Eric, Franchi, how are you doing? You're in beautiful New Jersey, right?
I'm doing well. I'm in beautiful New Jersey. How is beautiful Virginia?
It is like 80 degrees and 500% humidity. It is like the most humid place I've ever been in my life, and I've been to New Orleans.
How's the AC in the courtroom?
It is so blasting that everyone is. There are people wearing coats inside, and the bailiff keeps coming over and apologizing for it being too cold, but he hasn't been able to do anything about it. And we're shivering literally while we're taking our notes longhand and trying to stay awake. I saw Catherine from The Information. If you're listening, I saw you were asleep today. You were next to me. You were out. I was going to elbow you, but you don't snore, so I figured you'd get away with it.
I was going to say the chilliness is probably good for keeping everybody awake and attentive, but no, not Catherine.
Maybe.
All right, let's get into all that stuff in the refresh for sure.
Yeah, so we're going to do this a little out of order for our normal listeners. We're going to do intros and the news of the week, and then we'll switch to our interview, which we recorded previously with Josh Walsh, the CEO of BranchLab. So we'll talk about that when we intro him. And from a housekeeping perspective, I want to remind everyone that you can read my daily updates on the trial at the Monopoly Report, monopoly-report.com, daily newsletter. We try to keep it entertaining, lots of news, a lot of scoops that aren't really related to the trial, but that I've been able to glean from the evidence. Like today, we found out how much DV360 spends on YouTube versus everything else, and the answer is a lot. And then secondly, Eric and I talked that we're going to have our startup showcase at the Marketecture Live event on October 27th. I think we are announcing the winners on Monday or Tuesday, and then we can discuss it on the pod next week. Eric, are you excited about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've narrowed down our field of 5. We're just getting confirmations that everybody can be there in person. The 5 are really exciting, so I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, me too. All right, with that, let's just jump right in because it's only Wednesday when we're recording this, and it's already been a pretty busy week. So what's going on? It has.
Yeah, thank you for the M&A gods for blessing us with a deal on a Wednesday. Otherwise, this would be Google and AI as usual. But let's talk about Google and AI. So this is now day 3. You're probably after this going to be writing up your newsletter for tomorrow. Can you give us a little preview on, kind of stuff that might not make it in, or just in general, the vibey things that you could talk about that don't make the newsletter?
Yeah, so next week, we're going to have Alan Chappell back on. He was just on a couple weeks ago, but Alan and I will go into a lot of depth next week on the trial. We'll also have the trial mostly be over by next week. So what I can offer you right now is just the vibe, which is this is not a trial about guilt or innocence the way the first one was. The first one was fairly dramatic. It had a lot of testimony about, what happened and what was right and wrong. This is like a really dysfunctional negotiation. Mm-hmm. We've all been in complex deals where the two sides have different points of view about how a deal should get done. And usually you hammer it out and maybe you yell a little bit or whatever, and you get the job done. But that's not how courts work. In this case, the two sides have their own views for how this should be resolved. The company was already adjudicated as a guilty monopoly, so they're not even debating that anymore. They're just saying, here's how we think we should resolve the problem. the two sides are pretty far apart. And instead of, working to resolve the differences, they argue. They basically spend all time impeaching the other person's point of view. So you have witness after witness who's like, no, the other guys are wrong. They're stupid. None of that makes sense. And often the witnesses are, well, let's just say this. I think everyone who's listening can acknowledge I'm probably an expert in this area, having written the book. It's maddening for me to sit in the pews listening to witnesses who have the most vague understanding of the issues at hand and are pontificating about what they think. Like, hey, I really think it should be spun out. Oh, good for you. Congratulations. You think it should be spun out. Thank you for your input. And it's just like not. I mean, the judge makes this joke pretty often. She's awesome, Judge Brinkema. She's 82, and she just makes this joke a lot, which is like my two favorite words in the English language are "we settled." And it would be so much better if they settled than trying to defeat the other one rhetorically or through half-baked testimony so that they get their way. And especially when the end result could be a divestiture, which will be adjudicated in the court of investment bankers. Someone will have to buy it and someone will have to negotiate that, and that'll be real because there'll be real money. So what the court says in advance of that is, kind of academic. So that's my point of view on the vibe. It's a bit frustrating.
Yeah. In the newsletter today, the day 2 newsletter, which is really good, by the way. I love the little cartoon of whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, just sign up for that. Basically, it's like, there's two camps. There's obviously Google's camp, which is, don't spin it out, be the worst thing ever. And then there's all these variations of spinning out. So spin out AdX separately, consolidate or shut down AdX. What else? Spin AdX and DFP together. There's all these like different POVs on how it work. Yeah, permutations. And a bunch of our friends are kind of at odds on this one, which I found, from the cheap seats of the newsletter, pretty funny.
Yeah, the DOJ has only been the one calling witnesses so far, and some observers in the courtroom who are a little more familiar with the court process were sort of scratching their heads about why the DOJ witnesses were disagreeing with each other.
Right.
Typically, you would only bring witnesses when you know what they're going to say. And so you had like James Avery from Kevel, who's, I know an investment of yours, a good friend of mine. And he went up there and just said, no, they should be spun together, which is not the DOJ's point of view. And he was pretty forceful about it. And I'll buy it. Yeah. We have two parties who want to buy it who've testified so far. Is Casali, right? Index at Casali, James Avery at Kevel, and I'm sitting in the pews like, give me $1 billion and I'm in. Like I'm putting my chips in there. I'm not CEO of Marketecture anymore. I could run the ad exchange. And there's probably there's a ridiculous number of companies who would want to bid on this thing.
Yeah. Good marketing for Index and Kevel, by the way.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, if you, it's fun to punch a little bit above your weight. I mean, Index wouldn't be that much, but Kevel is a relatively small company to be doing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition.
Yeah, yeah. There was one quote at the end of your piece where you said that Jed from TTD was named. And he, there's some mention in cross-examination they thought SSP partners had undisclosed markups, including, at least one of the folks in the room. Was there any moment like that today?
This episode of Marketecture is brought to you by Start.io, an industry-leading mobile SSP. If you build ad campaigns, Start.io is offering Marketecture listeners curated evergreen deals with no audience fees. Visit www.start.io/no-fees to activate today. That's www.start.io/no-fees. Well, today, and I put it in Twitter and I mentioned it a moment ago, they put up some slides with data I've never seen publicly before about the percentage of all of Google's spend that goes to by format. So YouTube versus display versus app. And also the same thing for DV360. They showed a chart that illustrated the spend per format per month from DV360 over the years. And that second one, I made a little Twitter thread we can link in the show notes, and I'll probably put in the newsletter today. But I had to write it down, so it's not entirely accurate. But the news was that display is about $450 million a month in spend. So call it 5 or 6 billion in spend per year from DV360. And YouTube at the beginning of this period in 2019 was about $100 million a month going from DV360 to YouTube. And now it's 800 a month. So YouTube at this stage is $10 billion just from DV360 and is well more than half of the total spend from DV360. Like well more. Like DV360 at this point is a YouTube buying platform with a little bit of display thrown in,
right?
And a little video thrown in, which I mean the extent of that was a little shocking to me. And we know, and also it's great that we finally have a stat that all DV360, including YouTube, is probably 15 billion a year, which still puts them as the number one player. I don't think the Trade Desk has disclosed their total media spend, but I think it's somewhere in the 7-8 billion a year range.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Listeners can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And no one knows what Amazon's number is, but it kind of gives you a little bit more of a sense of the market share and how it's moving around.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Well, that's a good one.
It is a good one.
And more to come. On the Google front, since they loomed so large, there was 2 other bits of news related to AI that we should touch on. And we'll put all this in the newsletter. The first was, and I'll shout out Shiv Gupta from U of Digital. He was screaming about this on Friday. And again, just news on Friday dropped. We weren't able to cover it, but I thought it was actually really important. So they dropped a blog post on Chrome called "Go Behind the Browser with Chrome's New AI Features." So I haven't refreshed Chrome yet, but it seems like this thing is out there and it's live. And there's 2 things to touch on. So number one, they're rolling out Gemini in Chrome. So I think you're starting to see them bringing these tools to everyone, including it's kind of like searching for the searching in the Omnibus browser. And then the other thing, I thought this was the one. It's titled number 2. Get ready for your agentic browsing assistant. So they are basically releasing an agent in Chrome. According to them, these will let Gemini and Chrome handle those tedious tasks that take up so much of your time, like booking a haircut or ordering weekly groceries. You tell Gemini and Chrome what you want to get done, and it acts on web pages on your behalf while you focus on other things. So I think this is really big and shows the potential power of Google in terms of what they can do with AI, and it's just the beginning. Did you check this out?
Yeah, I did. The idea of a AI powered browser is really exciting for me, and so far there's the the Dia browser was the first, and then Perplexity has their sort of Comet experimental thing.
Right. Nothing really.
But to put this into Chrome is the big move. I'm really optimistic about this. I think it's maybe as relevant a user experience as a chatbot. And I think it actually could be good for publishers, not bad for publishers. This is the first time because you're going from zero. Okay, so you have zero search or zero click search, which is the chatbot where you get the answer instead of clicking out. But when you're engaged with a publisher, let's say you're on the Marketecture News website. And normally what you do is what is that article that Ari wrote about this 6 months ago? You search and you peck around and you do stuff. What if you could have a conversation with your browser about it? It's can you summarize the opinions on this website about blah? Should I subscribe to this website? Are they known for sending spam? There's so many different ways it could actually enhance content rich websites. I'll use the example. Maybe that's a bad example. Think about Yelp. What is, maybe I just said this last week. I hate it if I repeat myself, but what's going to be better? Asking an OpenAI chat box about what's the best restaurant in my area. Okay, that's option 1. Option 2 is going to Yelp and searching. Okay, that's a good option. Option 3 is Yelp implementing an LLM. That's a good one, but not everyone's going to be that great at it. And option 4, which I think is the answer, is an LLM that knows who you are in your browser that is on the Yelp website, right? So Yelp content plus a personalized browser experience. And maybe you have to pay Yelp for access to that. Maybe Yelp can still monetize in that circumstance. And I think it's really interesting, and I think it could be a great thing for the web.
Yeah. That's a really neat perspective. I guess the question that's raised is, will this be Chrome and Google owning it because it's the most popular browser? Or will this be something that's ubiquitous and there's like independent chatbots or LLMs, on all these publisher sites that are either like a third-party company or like the publishers or utilities themselves? That's going to be an interesting question, or both. And it's going to be like bots everywhere.
Yeah, also information versus workflow is another good question. I feel like there was an announcement of a thing called Operator from OpenAI, where it was a headless browser that did things on your behalf, and instantly everyone realized that was a terrible idea because it would have to log into every website for you and stuff like that. But having it in your actual browser suddenly becomes a good idea, where you can automate work-related things, or semi-work, like personal work type things. I think the examples they always give these tech companies about shopping for groceries or booking a vacation are kind of bogus. Let's do some real work in the browser, like all the listeners of this podcast generally do.
Yeah. I would say for one thing, for the listener, just go to this post. It's on the Chrome blog. And just look at the animation of this agentic browsing assistant and kind of let your B2C or B2B minds run wild on what this could be. So more to come on this, I think so. But it's pretty exciting. The other thing I thought was neat was, so Ben Thompson, Stratechery, awesome writer and thinker. He had a post this week that was a little mind-bending because it took the other side of the argument, basically saying Google's going to win in AI, but it's not going to be with this chatbot stuff at all. It's actually going to be through video, and specifically on YouTube. And it's as these things are on Stratechery, a super long post. We'll link to it. I'm not going to summarize it, but he points to how if the future of so much of this web stuff is really going to be video, YouTube has already won, sort of kind of versus TikTok. But they seem to be slowly rolling out some interesting things that point to the potential power of this. And the two that he pointed to, again, they're all in the post, is first, they're offering VO3 tools to creators to start to augment their own content creation using VO3 and like mixing videos or kind of adding AI. And then the other side, they dropped a little hint in another post saying that they're going to be using AI to find moments in video to promote commerce. So, like, literally, think the entirety of YouTube becomes shoppable, which I think could be like pretty powerful from a monetization perspective. So, I'm not doing the post justice. He's amazing. Read the post. It'll give you a completely different way of thinking about how Google or really other companies can win in AI and centered around video.
Yeah, my only point I'll make on that is that I don't think we've seen the end of innovation in the format of video that people experience. So like the same way, 5 or 6 years ago, the short form vertical video that you scroll was not a thing, or maybe it was a very niche thing, and now it's the dominant platform. I don't think we're done. And there's so many opportunities for format changes as opposed to saying, like, here's a video we already have, let's make it shoppable. Fine. Okay, that's one idea. But there are a lot of different ideas, and AI can enable things that are, would seem quite futuristic right now, like a personal shopping video, not a personal shopper and not a video, but a personal shopper video that knows you, knows your size, knows your style, and like will talk to you for a half an hour about how you want to dress professionally or something like that, or how you want to dress your bridesmaids for a wedding. So there's some really interesting things that could happen if you take a kind of another leap in the technology cycle.
Yeah, well said. And we're already seeing it with ads, right? Like, we're seeing the, beginnings of real personalization around ads using AI. And obviously all this stuff is super early, and it'll start with ads.
Yeah, totally.
All right, that's enough Google. Let's talk IAS. So, Lisa, we had you on like last week. What's going on?
She was holding out on us. She had the money in the bag underneath her desk. There was a couple $1 billion. And she was just like, hey, no big deal. We're just measuring stuff. AI is cool.
Yeah, she did seem to be, fairly upbeat for a tough interview from Mr. Paparo. So for those who didn't see the news, again, today's Wednesday. You're going to hear this on Friday. IAS was acquired for $1.9 billion by the PE firm NovaCap. So a couple of things here, and we'll talk about what this means. So first is it was a premium to yesterday's closing price, 22% premium. This is, it implies kind of like a 4x, maybe a little bit less. Their trailing 12 months revenue was 570 million, so a 1.9 billion buyout, right? Like, you know, was
What's it on earnings? Because I mean, obviously it's a mature company. We should do earnings multiple.
yeah, I did it off the top line. We'll check that out and discuss on the X. But you know, on a top line, which is, you know, how oftentimes you look at this stuff, it's certainly a discount. And the acquirer, excuse me, is interesting. So NovaCap, they made the news by acquiring Cadent, which was a pretty big deal, and then Adherent. So they seem to be, you know, an active buyer with a thesis on ad tech and actively doing deals. So what do we think? What do we think about this? And then what happens from here?
Yeah, I'm scratching my head a little bit here because it was not an unsuccessful company, but not a leader, I guess is where I'd put it. Like, you know, they were certainly losing some share, maybe losing some mojo to their arch rival, Double Verify, DV. So why couldn't they fix that in public? Like, was there something that needed to be done to the company, like structurally, that was so big you couldn't do it as a public company, and then they'll take it offline, do those things, either slim down or bulk up, and then go public again? Because if you're just bringing it private to make marginal improvements and then try to go public again, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I just wonder, is this a failure of the public markets, or is there some missing part of the strategy we're not seeing that needs to be done in private?
Yeah, it's a moment in time, right? Like, we've talked about this category so much. And I think the thing that we've said constantly is, you know, we want to see more innovation out of these legacy verification, you can call them something else, companies today. And you've got startups that are using AI and like really nipping at their heels, maybe not from a customer adoption perspective, but showing, you know, what can be done using some of these tools. So I look at this as take the thing private, really like retool this for the AI era, likely do some acquisitions. There's a lot of good assets for IAS. They're, you know, a known trusted brand. They've got a really good customer list. They've got a really good partner list. So I think it's, you know, do some real work to kind of like build this in private for the AI era, and then come out and you look to go public again. NovaCap, they don't strike me as a rip all the costs out, you know, do some, dump some debt on it and just keep like kind of ripping this down, you know, kind of the bad PE style. They strike me as, look, they bought Cadent and then they bought Adherent, right? So, you know, is IAS an anchor for more acquisitions and it comes out as a different type of company? That's my bet here.
Yeah, I don't think slim down makes sense. They're not big enough. They're not fat. They, you know, you can't cut this thing to growth. You got to grow it. So here's what I would do. Just, I know you asked what my opinion is. Step one, you sell Publica for like $500 million to get that back off your 1.9. So Publica video ad server, that acquisition never made any sense. There's a hot market for video ad server. You could probably sell it to Netflix tomorrow for $500 million.
You think that much?
Yeah, well, they bought it for 250, which was probably too much. But there are no video ad servers. If you wanted to acquire one, who would you buy? There's like no one to buy. So maybe Netflix wouldn't buy it. Maybe Walmart would. Maybe Samsung would. There's a lot of options out there. And then on bulking up, you know, you kind of have a choice. You can either double down on measurement and look at Kantar. You can even look at Nielsen, ComScore. There's a lot of options. Or you can kind of go after the double verify approach and try to get into more of the bigger picture optimization, et cetera. I don't know who you'd buy in that space, but that would be the other option. But there's a lot of stuff you could do to try to, you know, juice the growth rates and make it a more exciting company.
Yeah, I think option two is pretty exciting. And there's, to, you know, answer the question, there's a lot of these companies that are building the custom algorithms and, you know, kind of the modern measurement solutions that I think would be like, you know, super interesting to be part of. IAS, again, who has like a big customer base and a big partner base. So we shall see.
Yep, it'll be interesting. Watch the space.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think we see more of this? Like companies going private to retool for the AI era? Or you think this was a one of one?
I don't think you need to go private to retool for the AI era. It's not unless you go private because you want to potentially have a period of some time where you're significantly less attractive as a public company, right?
Yeah. Or just less scrutiny and like less scrutiny, reporting, like quarterly. That's so hard. Ask anybody.
So when you say retool for the AI era, what that means to me is that I would accept like much lower margins or a reduction in revenue while I retooled. That would be the reason why. And I don't think that's necessary for most companies. Like you can add AI and manage through. If you were a successful public company, you could get through that transition without going private, unless there was something so fundamental to what you did that AI was going to blast your revenue over that period. I don't think IAS is in that position where they're going to get like transformed out of their business in the next 12 months. So I have to believe that they're going private because they want to do some big, bulking up rather than like a retool.
Got it. Okay. All right. We'll revisit this. Partnership. TTD and Axiom announced a pretty interesting partnership or a deepening of their partnership around measurement. So the product's called True Intelligence. It aims to create a live feedback loop from UIDs targeted by TTD with results collected by Axiom, thus giving marketers the type of measurement that they get from the walled gardens, but craving in the open web. This is not a first for Axiom. They've similar product with Amazon. But I think this is a pretty good advancement by TTD in having something that's interesting and fresh for the quote unquote outcomes era.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many measurement partners have adopted UID2, and obviously the more they do, the more valuable it becomes to their customers.
Yeah.
So seems pretty important from that perspective.
Yeah, it does. Like I said, I think we're going to see, innovation out of TTD last week. I had no idea this was coming. But this is the type of stuff that I'd like to see them do because this is like what marketers care about. It matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else? NVIDIA. So this is not an ad tech deal, but because this is AI and it touches ad tech in so many ways, like it's worth talking about. And it's just like wild. So NVIDIA is investing $100 million in OpenAI.
Billion.
100 billion in OpenAI, turn the B to the M. And in exchange, they are getting like that amount of revenue commitment from OpenAI, and then plus they get the equity upside. So this is a genius deal by NVIDIA.
Yeah, wasn't there a deal like this with Oracle just like last week?
Mm-hmm. Yep, Oracle got a long-term commitment. I don't believe that they announced who the customer was. But similarly, this was what set the Oracle stock up 30% overnight.
Round tripping, man. It's like Web 1.0 all over again. It's like you give AOL all your VC money, and then they advertise, and then your valuation goes up.
It is. I think I picked this up on the on one of the write-ups, but the hot line: compute capacity is the new moat. They just need so much capacity to build out what they're looking to do.
Sure, that makes sense, I guess, in some world.
I think Benedict,
Good. Benedict Evans made some snide comment on Threads about it, which was like, these round trip deals sound great, but it's one of those things that when the tide goes down,
music stops.
Yeah, it's not the best.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's reason to believe that things are different this time, but we saw it. Meta. Remember when Meta had that, Zuck had that meeting at the White House, and he asked how much you're going to be investing in data centers, and he kind of dropped the 600 billion line. These are like real numbers, so it's mind-boggling.
It is. I mean, I there's nothing stopping the tech the big tech companies at this point. It's just like pure runway in front of them, and like the rest of the stock market's sort of irrelevant. And the Dow keeps going up, and it doesn't seem to matter even if the economy is good or bad or shaky. There's just so much opportunity ahead.
Yeah, for these 7 companies for sure. All right, I think that's a good news of the week.
All right, awesome. So as we said at the beginning, we're going to do the interview last. So we have Josh Walsh from BranchLab. So you're an investor in BranchLab, right?
Yes, I am, and I believe you were an advisor to BranchLab.
I'm an advisor. So they, ostensibly they're in pharma marketing, and we've talked about, and we asked Josh about the recent Deep Intent transaction and about RFK Jr., and that's what we really wanted to talk to him about because it's a really interesting area. But also it's interesting that what they're doing really is like applying neural networks to data. Basically saying like we have data set 1 and we need to infer its attributes on data set 2 without using any PII or anything like that because of HIPAA and stuff like that. So they've built some really interesting tech to do that. And Josh was I think he was one of the founders of AdTheorent, or was he a product manager at AdTheorent or something along those lines?
Co-founder at AdTheorent. So AdTheorent had a very, very healthy health business.
Exactly. So I think it's a really interesting interview for the pharma aspects, but also the tech aspects. So I hope you enjoy that. And then we'll be back next week with sort of a remedies phase wrap up with Alan Chappelle, which should be interesting because the trial will be nearly over by the time we record that next week. So hopefully you'll tune in. All right.
And it's not just about pharma with Josh, by the way. He's got a big name investor that just joined the company, and we get into that as well. Pretty fun story.
Yeah, exactly. All right. All right. See you next week. All right. We're here with Josh Walsh, the CEO and founder of BranchLab, an innovative company in the pharma ad space. I'm an advisor and Eric is an investor, so I think we get all that out of the way first. But we're not here to just pump up our investments. We want to actually hear what Josh has to say. So, Josh, thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So what is BranchLab?
Yeah. So BranchLab, in a nutshell, what we're doing is we're training different types of neural networks. We're training them on health data in a way that allows them to predict health outcomes in non-health data. So it's it's kind of a more future privacy forward way of activating against healthcare audiences today by deploying only non-health data that is predictive of a given health outcome.
Non-health data, meaning just generic data like zip codes and stuff like that?
Yeah, like think demo, psycho, sometimes firmographic information. Like our customers are large-scale publishers, ad tech companies, and for the most part, agencies that sit on top of large, rich, robust CRM data sets that are otherwise not very useful in the, say, pharmaceutical advertising space. We can deploy neural networks on top of that non-health, non-sensitive data in a way that allows it to perform to the degree that, say, a typical health data, legacy health data segment would.
Right. And you can't use the data raw because of HIPAA and privacy and things like that, right?
And more regulations coming down the pike, like even the way that we've been doing it. I've been in this space for a long time. The way that we've been deploying healthcare audiences over the past 10 years is under some scrutiny with different state regulations. My Health, My Data out of Washington is important. New York's S929 is another one. So it's an evolving regulatory space. And for me, that means a very interesting data problem, which was kind of the precipice for founding this company.
Yeah, so a lot going on in pharma. So you raised funding. A company that we've had on Deep Intent raised a giant, or sold the majority of his company for a huge amount of money, and then we have the federal government talking about banning types of advertising. So let's go one at a time and talk about that.
Sure.
That's part of kind of the impetus for having you here. So let's talk about you first. It's always easy to talk about yourself. So you raised a strategic round recently?
Yeah, strategic round. It's kind of a fun story. We were not fundraising. From time to time, we get inbound from different VCs, basically, saying, "Hey, we heard of you from so and so, and we want to talk." I'm in heads down builder mode, like kind of not taking those meetings at the moment. But this one came in from Lance Armstrong, and he was willing to, right? And after figuring out that it wasn't a bot, he offered to come out to our HQ in Boulder, Colorado, and have a sit down. And he wanted to talk about our business. And we were very upfront. We're not raising money, so we're not really having these types of conversations. But if you want to come by and talk, let's have a cup of coffee, type of thing. And honestly, we were kind of impressed with Next as a fund. So Next Ventures, the team at Next, and their mission. They basically came in wanting more to talk about their passion to transform the U.S. healthcare system, more from like a reactive sick care system to a more proactive system, and they view BranchLab they viewed BranchLab as a potential piece of that larger mission. So the good quest on both sides aligned really well right out the gate. And as you both know, it ultimately will come down to numbers as well.
Sure.
And we met with them on a Monday morning, and we closed the deal Friday morning.
Wow.
It was a good deal. They're great partners, and frankly, Lance is an American icon. Everyone knows him as an athlete, as a public health advocate. Getting to know Lance Armstrong, the venture capitalist, over the last few months has been, in some ways, equally as impressive as his athletic background. I mean, if we look at the track record of his investments, the track record of Next Ventures, his fund, it really speaks for itself. And the partners that he has in that firm, Jordan and Mel, are just fantastic. So, like I mentioned, we weren't raising, but the stars aligned, and we couldn't be happier to be in business with these people.
So it's not a family office just with his own money. This is a legit venture capital firm.
This is legit. Like Fund 2 had a great Fund 1, on to Fund 2. They know what they're doing. It was, like I said, it was a bit of like a learning curve for me as well. Like get to know these folks in this capacity, and it's been impressive.
Would you say it was a big step up from Aperium giving you money?
I would say it's a lateral step.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah. I think in my mind, it's like a 1 + 1 = 3 scenario.
Sure.
And we're all going for a ride, Eric included, early next month. So we'll get the whole crew.
Wait,
together.
are you serious, Eric? You going on a ride with Lance Armstrong?
I mean, how could I say no?
Right. I could think of a lot of ways to say no, like my hamstring hurts, doctor said I can't. You should find out how many hills there are before you get on that bike.
This is true. Josh, one question that everything moves so fast with that deal. I never asked you. Were you like a fan of Lance going in, and did that like kind of add another dimension to the conversations?
I would say, to some extent, yes. Like, someone like Lance, wants to come out to Boulder and come to the office and cold LinkedIn message that effectively says like, "Hey, we've been hearing a lot about your company. Can we come talk about your company?" Sure. I do get, like a lot of entrepreneurs do, like get those messages from time to time. When you're not in fundraising mode, you kick them off till later. Maybe this one wasn't kicked off, because of, to some extent from that influence.
Wait, did Lance personally cold DM you on LinkedIn, or was it one of his associates?
It was, I think I got a cold invite. I probably have a screenshot of it on my phone.
Okay.
By the way, Lance is going to listen to this. I'm going to be really embarrassed about it.
We would love to have Lance at our next Marketecture Live, by the way. Keynote, a lot of exposure, easy softball questions.
Well, when Eric's just got to keep up with him on the ride to make sure he can communicate that, at the front of the peloton.
While he's like trying to breathe, trying to survive. Like, Lance, I need you to be at our event.
Exactly.
All right, let's transition to the next topic, which was, there's this Deep Intent is a company that, I've known for a while. We're going to have the CEO at our Marketecture Live, which is great. They're sort of, I'd always thought of them as sort of a niche healthcare DSP. They're sort of competitive with you, but I'd like you to just give us some perspective on it. They just sold a majority of the company to a PE firm called Vitruvian for $637 million. That's a really big valuation for a niche DSP. What did we learn from that other than they're doing well?
Yeah, I would say, Deep Intent. First of all, congrats, Chris. Like, what a comeback story. Like, they've kind of been through the ringer and made it through the other side. Like, so, you know, congratulations to Chris and team. Amazing job. I would also say Deep Intent is not competitive with BranchLab. Like, we partner with Deep Intent. Like, a lot of our customers will end up deploying BranchLab powered audiences on the Deep Intent DSP. In my background, founding AdTheorent, founding AdTheorent Health, a bit more competitive there, of course, both DSPs. But I think what is more clear to folks who haven't worked in pharma is just the upside here. Like, this is a huge, specially regulated, hyper-specific market that requires specialized tools. And Deep Intent at that valuation is just more proof of that. And there's been plenty of proof of it over the years, by the way. It's really just the latest. So yeah, congrats to that team. Like, stoked for Chris, stoked for that whole organization.
So you're providing data in some cases to their customers who are executing using the DSP. Why do you need a specialist in this market? If it seems, I understand why you need a specialist on the data side, because you can't use the raw healthcare data in any way, really. But once you convert it to non-healthcare data, isn't it open game and Trade Desk or anyone else should be able to execute?
Maybe. It depends which lawyer you want to ask. So let me back up. BranchLab does not provide data to anyone. BranchLab's service is a neural network that can predict onto your data and make your data useful in that way. We don't sell data. We're not selling audiences. Like, our customers are big scale agencies that have CRMs. They want to be able to target those CRMs with the same efficacy as if they were targeting, say, like a health audience, like a traditional health audience, or let's say legacy health audience. That's a distinct difference with BranchLab. We're the only company in that space.
Okay. Yeah.
The one reason why we operate in that unique way is, is different states' regulations and how a lawyer may read that. Now, the best third-party credible source that we have on the most important state regulation, called My Health, My Data, out of Washington, comes out of Harvard Law, and it's a paper entitled, "Can Washington Change Pharmaceutical Advertising Forever?" It's really the only third-party credible source that we have that breaks down how should this law be interpreted in the advertising space.
Right.
So it's like a kind of, the law wasn't written for advertising, but here's how it should apply for advertising.
Right.
A lot of brands, a lot of publishers, and a lot of large-scale DSPs, for example, read that paper the way we read that, and the legacy way of basically sending health audiences is prohibited in that state and probably prohibited in other states.
Okay.
And the reason for that, Ari, I know it's like a long-winded run-on sentence or two, is because of how easily identifiable an advertising ID becomes once it's activated.
So, like, the classic way, if I wanted to use, say, a credit card transaction as a targeting parameter in online, the way it works at a very, very granular level is that at some point, me as a consumer go to either a credit card page, a checkout page, or a bank's page, and they collect online telemetry about me, cookie, IP address, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then there's a match. And then I go into a DSP and I can pull in those matched IDs, and I can say, oh, this person bought something at, REI or wherever.
That's right.
And so that is like that. I think that's considered pseudo-anonymous. But regardless of the terms, you're in Washington State under this law, that is not allowed. You couldn't do something like that.
Again, this is like a legal argument, so I'll take
Sure.
on the argument coming out of that paper from Harvard. That would not be allowed. The reason why that would not be allowed is, even though it's pseudonymous, or some might say it's anonymized on both sides, because it can easily be re-identified, it fails Washington's My Health, My Data. Upcoming regulations, out of New York, S929, other states have things in place. Like, rapidly, we're getting to a place where, like, each state has a different regulation. It's making this whole thing hyper complicated. So BranchLab's whole mission is to take hyper-regulated data, lock it behind a neural net, never let it in or out, and instead just deploy lightweight probability models, think like a transformer neural net. And that way, that data is never attached to a advertising ID, pseudonymized, anonymized, or otherwise.
All right, let's talk. Let's talk the government, federal government. So, Eric and I were talking in the last pod about this. That like at the beginning of the year, we thought the signs were that RFK Jr., as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, he was going to try to push through a pharma ad ban, or at least was making noise about it. And now we're here in September, and we're hearing about the so-called closing the loophole on pharma ads, so that they have to disclose more side effects. What's your current understanding of the political winds, and we'll get to what we think is going to happen. What do you think the current state of play is?
Yeah, I mean, from a ban perspective, I mean, I think this administration is taking on what really is a bipartisan winning issue, which is how can we, better fight for the patient slash consumer.
Okay.
Broadly speaking, this memo that you're referring to, asking or mandating rather pharmaceutical advertising to like better outline the benefits and potential negatives of a given treatment is a good thing. I don't think many folks are going to argue against this. These types of things tend to be quite bipartisan. It's a way for the quote unquote Maha movement to like broadcast that they're making progress towards towards this larger mission that they mentioned earlier in the year that won't come to fruition. So that's kind of the way I see the current situation.
I think you're being kind of nice about it, but it sounds like they're trying to get a political win here, regardless of whether it really moves the ball forward that much.
I think it might move the ball slightly forward.
It's like a running joke, though. I mean, it's on SNL and stuff that pharma ads already have too many side effects warnings, and no one pays attention to them. And the side effects are like, you may die. If that's a side effect, then I'm not sure how much more grave we can get. Do you know practically if the current proposal goes through, how much it will change ads?
It's not that specific.
Okay.
There's some talking. I think we'll have to wait and see, but better warnings, maybe not warnings that are like sped up like 5x, like the speed of a normal human speech type of thing. Like, I think we'll see some movement there, but heavily creative and messaging, related. Yeah.
And it'll affect digital as well, not just TV.
It should. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should. I mean, the ban that you're referencing for the ban that RFK mentioned he wanted to implement more than a year ago now was specific to TV only. That's not mentioned in this more recent memo.
Cool. So just stepping back, what do you see the future of the next, couple of years, political and just technical on pharma ads? Just give us your insights of what you're seeing on the ground.
Sure. I think an outright ban on TV or other is very, very unlikely. It won't be the first time it's been challenged, by the way. Pharmaceutical advertising has been held up under First Amendment law in the past, and it will be held up again. Frankly, this administration, my prediction would be I don't think they go against it because I don't see them going against the First Amendment rights issue. That's my personal feeling about that. If they were to,
from an ideological perspective, you mean?
That I believe that would be true.
Okay.
So I do think this administration will look towards ways to, perhaps put further regulation on the industry, like this memo. I think there's a real possibility that they look at the way targeting is orchestrated, which we sort of briefly talked about earlier, and there's precedents for this. Again, precedents coming out of states. There's been some legal action out of the FTC under Lena Khan, obviously new administration over there. But is it possible that at the federal level, this administration looks at multiple states have different regulations? Do we just want to make one federal thing? And again, I don't think folks will fight it. When My Health, My Data came out of Washington, when S929 passed the New York Congress, nobody on either side of the aisle fought it. Neither did the pharma companies. So I think it's a potentially easy win to say, in perhaps an inflammatory way, like let's stop taking people's most personal data and using it to advertise to them. Now I would I'll make a statement here, Ari, and I probably wouldn't have fully believed this without seeing the data firsthand. But when done responsibly, advertising can genuinely be one of the most powerful tools for improving public health. Let me unpack that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. And there are other things that influence this, but looking at the data that we have access to look at, general statement, ethically, responsibly produced advertising, healthcare, pharmaceutical advertising, it doesn't necessarily equal more sales of drugs. It equals more doctor visits. In other words, like, if you didn't need a doctor to go fill a prescription, I don't know how I would feel about the industry that I've worked in for the past 10 plus years. But the best that we can do is talk to your doctor if. And what we can see empirically in the data is the more times per year that a patient spends with their, more times per year that they spend time with their physician, health outcome improves, like mathematically.
Right.
So there's a lot of potential to do maximum good here, both for public health and for new drug creation, et cetera, et cetera. I do think we need to be hyper ethical about messaging and very intentional about data use and these other items. If it requires regulations to ensure that the industry does that, I applaud it. I hope that doesn't need to happen. In my opinion, privacy by design technology can solve this problem very quickly versus having to wait for things to be settled in the courts. So that's my hope, but I don't see a ban here. I potentially see more regulation, and the output of that, I believe, is better health outcomes for the U.S. population.
All right, there you heard it here first. Ask your doctor. That's the key to success. Stop doom scrolling on WebMD and asking ChatGPT why your hip hurts. Just ask your doctor.
I think I would agree with that.
Josh, thank you so much for joining us. This is really informative.
Sure thing. Thank you both.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture Podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.